So Bank of Uganda sold off 3 treasury bonds yesterday. The 20-year bond with a coupon rate of 15%, the 10-year bond, the new 10-year bond with a coupon rate of 16%, and the 3-year bond. But my interest is in the 20-year bond and the 10-year bond. As you always know, those are the bonds which I mostly advise people to go for because of the tax advantages and the interest rate. What is shocking, and it's not even shocking, we expected this, on how varyingly these two bonds performed. The 10-year bond with a coupon rate of 16% came out at a yield to maturity of 15.45%. Yes, 15.45%, which automatically made it to have a premium of 5%. Now, the 10-year bond pays a coupon in May and in November. So it last paid a coupon around May 27th there. So you can say realistically, it's almost 50 days with accrued interest rate. However much there is some accrued interest rate, the premium was there because the yield to maturity or the cutoff yield was lower than the coupon rate. So that's why many people, many investors went for the 10-year bond because it has a higher coupon rate. So many people always pay attention to the coupon rate, right? So they ended up paying 5% premium. On the other hand, the 20-year bond, which has a coupon rate of 15%, had a yield to maturity of 15.95%, the cutoff yield of 15.95%. And the people who bought the 20-year bond got a discount of over 5%. So these two bonds moved in a total direction in a range of almost 10% spectrum. What do I mean? The 10-year bonds paid 5% premium. The 20-year bonds paid 5% discount, right? You add the two, you have a 10% spectrum. And it was interesting to pay attention to that the 20-year bond had around 12 billion in retail bidding, and the 10-year bond had almost 14 billion in retail bidding. So people still pay attention to and go for the higher coupon rate instead of anticipating which one will have a higher yield to maturity. So who made a better deal? The person who bought the 20-year bond got a better deal. How? Of course, someone who bought the 10-year bond has a higher coupon rate, but they paid more money than someone who bought a 10-year bond, a 20-year bond. So that had you spent the same amount of money, if someone for 10 million, you buy the 20-year bond, you paid around 9.5 million. But for 10 million bond on a 10-year bond, you had to pay 10.05. Yes, 10.5 actually. 10 million and 500k there. But had you both spent the same money, 10 million and 500,000, the one of the 10-year bond would have got exactly the 10 million bond, and the person of the 20-year bond would have got 11 million worth of bond. Plus, actually. And the coupon rate, the coupon income they would get, the one of the 10-year bond would get around 720,000 UGX per every 6 months. And the one of the 20-year bond would get around 740 plus if you had spent the same amount of money. I always talk about understanding the yield and the coupon rates. People always pay attention to the coupon rates. They do not pay attention to the yield. Yet the actual profits that you make on these investments is around the yield to maturity, or the cutoff yield is what determines what you pay. What you pay is your actual investment, not the face value. The coupon rate determines what is paid to you, which is extremely important. However, the yield to maturity determines what you actually pay. So if your goal is always to make the most money, always go for where you're going to get the higher yield to maturity. Inherently, it's hard to explain and hard to understand, but it will always make the most money, right? So for those two bonds, the 10-year bond, whereas it has a higher coupon rate than the 20-year bond, if someone whose goal was profit maximization, then the 20-year bond was a better deal. However, there are people who might have gone for the 10-year bond because of the laddering purposes. It pays in May and November, especially if they did not buy the recently 2035 10-year bond, because even that one was paying in May and in November. They pay 1 week apart, right? So if you did not have the 2035 bond, then the 2037 bond is a good bond to buy. But if you already had the 2037 bond, maybe you wanted to increase your laddering perspective, or maybe you went for the 10-year bond because you don't want to invest in anything more than 10 years. That's also acceptable. But if your goal was profit maximization, then, and you went for the 10-year bond just because it has a higher coupon rate, this should be the lesson for you.